For those that are guests, on a normal basis, this is how it happens. I read a biblical text. I then teach that text, meaning I explain what God meant by what God said in that text, and then I apply the text. That is expository preaching in a nutshell. And we're not doing that today. There are no sermon notes because this is not a sermon. Understand, this is not a sermon. I'm not teaching from a text. This is, though, a conversation we have to have. Since moving here, I have encountered increasing questions about our church's denominational name. And it's becoming more and more problematic because El Paso is unlike some other parts of Texas and other parts of the South. In Alabama, 1 out of 4 adults attend a Baptist church. Amazing. But that's not the case here. When this church started in 1956, and it started as a missions project from First Baptist Church downtown El Paso. That was this church's mother church. When this church started, the percentage of Hispanics in El Paso was much smaller than it is now in 2025. At this moment, El Paso's population at this moment is 81.5% Hispanic. That means I'm a minority, but I don't even care. Doesn't bother me at all. That's fine. But I've seen some estimates as high as 85% Hispanic. Fortunate for me, most of them can also speak English. The reason that percentage is an important statistic is because the religious affiliation of Hispanics is Catholic, even if it's a name only. Catholicism is a part of the Hispanic culture. This isn't the Bible Belt part of Texas. This is the Catholic Belt part of Texas. And the denominational name Baptist is not attractive to Catholics. To be technical, the most recent research indicates that all denominational labels are becoming less and less acceptable to emerging generations. The Baptist label has caused some serious confusion, in part because Baptists are not homogeneous, meaning Baptists are not all one and the same. I shared some of this information earlier in another sermon, but the man that founded the state of Rhode Island was a theologian named Roger Williams. And in 1638, Reverend Williams also started the first Baptist congregation in the New England colonies. He was one of the first proponents of religious freedom and the separation of church and state, and he was also considered to be the first abolitionist in North America, meaning he was the first person to publicly denounce the slave trade. He founded First Baptist Church in Providence, Rhode Island. That church still exists. They have a website. That church has a full schedule of services and activities. Unfortunately, I couldn't attend there because it is not a theologically conservative congregation. But since that time, in the 17th century, Baptists have multiplied in all different directions. Someone said Baptists resemble Heinz ketchup. There are some 57 varieties of them. Well, actually, there are more than that. A friend of mine did some research into this subject and counted some 124 different U.S. Baptist denominations, associations, and groups. And some of them are extremely different from one another. Some examples. Some Baptist churches are elder-ruled. Our previous congregation in Nevada was elder-ruled, although most Baptist congregations have congregational rule. Some Baptist churches consider themselves Protestants. And then other Baptist groups argue that no, Protestant denominations originated from those persons inside the Catholic Church that protested against the church and then came out of the church either on a voluntary basis or through excommunication. The argument is that historic Baptists were never part of the Catholic Church and should never be considered Protestants. That's called Baptist perpetuity. And Baptist pastor John Milton Carroll made that position famous in a small booklet published in 1931 called The Trail of Blood. Some Baptist congregations practice washing one another's feet as a required ordinance. We don't do that. We encourage people to wash their own feet at home. Some Baptists believe someone's salvation is permanent, and then some Baptists believe someone's salvation can be forfeited, as theological Arminianism teaches. And then there are Reformed Baptists that are more theologically Calvinistic. Baptists can't even agree on how the Baptist church started. Some teach it started during the 17th century in the English separatist movement, and that would be my position. And then some teach it started as an extension of Anabaptist and Mennonite traditions. And then some teach what is called Baptist successionism. Baptist successionism, according to them, Jesus' personal PR man, John the Baptist, actually started the Baptist church, according to this perspective. And all legitimate churches, according to them, have succeeded from John the Baptist in a direct line through baptism. That doctrine means there is no acceptable Christian baptism outside of being baptized in a, quote, Baptist church. Alien baptism, meaning baptism from a non-Baptist church, is considered invalid. I categorically, unequivocally reject that teaching. There is no biblical basis for such a concept as Baptist successionism. John the Baptist meant John the Baptizer because that's what he did. And he wasn't even part of the church. The church started 10 days after Jesus' ascension and started at that Jewish feast in an upper room in Jerusalem called Pentecost. And John had been executed sometime before that. Also, John 3, verse 29 states that John the Baptist was a friend of the bridegroom. A friend of the bridegroom. Now, the church is considered, in a metaphorical sense, the church is the bride, and Jesus himself is the bridegroom. So if John was a friend of the bridegroom, then he wasn't part of the bride, which is the church. To me, all of that is utter foolishness, Baptist successionism. In some successionist Baptist churches, someone is required to be rebaptized each time he moves his membership to another Baptist church. Some Baptist churches hold to a position called closed communion, meaning that communion is closed off to all Christians other than the members of that particular denomination. We practice open communion. Open communion meaning communion is open to anyone who has Jesus. Some Baptists are egalitarian and ordain women to be pastors. We are more complementarian, so we don't ordain female pastors. Not because we're misogynistic, but because a female cannot meet the biblical criteria required to be a pastor, as stated in 1 Timothy 3, verses 1 through 7. Some Baptist churches are more formal and liturgical and include stained glass, robe choirs, huge pipe organs, and hymns from the 18th century and earlier. Some have a divided chancel. A divided chancel means there are two lecterns or two pulpits, one on either side of the platform, and the pastor moves between them, and he wears a clerical robe. Then some Baptist congregations are extremely contemporary. Their worship literally represents or resembles a rock concert. There's strobe lights, dry ice, and smoke machines, and secular music is sometimes part of the service. Some Baptist congregations in certain areas of the South have camp meetings. I've seen this on video. Camp meetings that rival the intense emotional hysteria that some Pentecostals are famous for. Then, in a theological sense, some Baptist churches are so progressive that those congregations have apostatized from the Christian faith and can no longer be considered evangelical. As an example, Ebenezer Baptist Church in Atlanta was founded in 1886. It is a historic congregation because Martin Luther King Sr. pastored there from 1931 to 1975. His son, Martin Luther King Jr., co-pastored, meaning he pastored beside his father, co-pastored the church from 1960 until his assassination in 1968. Now, the present pastor is the, quote, Honorable Reverend Dr. Raphael Warnock. He has served since 2005 as the church's 5th pastor. He is also a United States Senator from Georgia, and he is an extremely progressive Democrat. As a quote-unquote Baptist, Dr. Warnock is a professing Christian, but he doesn't have a biblical worldview. He teaches black liberation, Marxist black liberation theology, and he advertises himself as the pro-choice pastor, meaning he is pro-abortion. From a recent Easter sermon, he questioned the literal resurrection of Jesus. And remember, if there is no resurrection, there is no Christianity. He questions that. And in the same sermon, he also made the statement, quote, if you are a Christian or not, through a commitment to helping others, we are able to save ourselves. That couldn't be more unbiblical. Jesus Christ came to this earth to become the Savior because we cannot save ourselves. I would argue Raphael Warnock is not a true Christian. In biblical language, he's an apostate, but he claims to be a Baptist. Jamal Bryant is the pastor of another mega church in Atlanta called New Birth Missionary Baptist Church. He is a mess. He made the statement that Jesus was wrong 85% of the time. No, that would be me, not Jesus. He has also said he wants to start a cannabis farm on unused acreage the church owns. So he's big into weed. But he claims to be a Baptist. One more is Dr. Delman Coates, who pastors Mount Enon Baptist Church in Clinton, Maryland. That is a congregation of more than 9,000. In a recent sermon, he argued that the Bible does not condemn or discourage sexual relations before marriage. According to him, premarital sexual relations is acceptable to God. It's not, but he claims to be a Baptist. I'm a second-generation Baptist pastor. Our oldest son is now a third-generation Baptist pastor. It was a surreal experience for me to preach to his congregation this past Sunday morning. I'm sitting there while he's introducing me, and I can't believe it. And I know I preached for my father before he retired, but it was an honor to preach for our son. And believe it or not, they actually liked it. I have attended Baptist churches since I was less than a month old, although I graduated from non-denominational, interdenominational universities in both undergraduate and graduate school. I have now pastored 8 Baptist congregations in 4 different states, so I do know something about Baptist. And I understand better than most that, as we said earlier, Baptists are not homogeneous. Consider the incredible differences between personalities that have worn the Baptist label. For decades, Jimmy Carter taught an adult Sunday school class in a Southern Baptist church. I once had the unique privilege of having a conversation with his former pastor, who unfortunately passed before Mr. Carter did. Wonderful man. President Truman was a member of First Baptist Church in Independence, Missouri, not far from the Truman Library and where he is buried. Evangelist Billy Graham was a lifelong Southern Baptist. His son Franklin Graham is head of Samaritan's Purse. Franklin is a Southern Baptist. Martin Luther King Jr. was ordained a Baptist minister And as we said, he co-pastored a Baptist congregation. Reverend Al Sharpton, who is a serious piece of work. Reverend Al is also a Baptist minister who, I should add, has never pastored a church. Charles Stanley pastored the famous First Baptist Church in Atlanta. And Rick Warren pastored one of this nation's largest ever Baptist congregation, Saddleback Church in Lake Forest, California. Tim Tebow is a Southern Baptist, and his parents were Southern Baptist missionaries to the Philippines. Tony Campolo was a popular author and liberal, progressive sociologist, but he was a Baptist, and he taught at a Baptist seminary. Chuck Norris is a Baptist. I mean, that's a good reason to be one right there. Glenn Campbell was a Baptist. Aretha Franklin and Britney Spears. And so was Johnny Cash, Roy Orbison, Sam Cooke, Bill Haley, Buddy Holly, and Whitney Houston. So was famous devotional author Oswald Chambers. And the Green Bay Packers Minister of Defense, Reggie White, were Baptist. And on and on and on. Now, some of those names I don't believe were actual Christians. Meaning some of them were Baptist in name, but were not true converted people. And then to add more confusion to this debate, since 1989, the most often mentioned Baptist church in the media is the hate-mongering and inbred Westboro Baptist Church from Topeka, Kansas. The church there is now less than 50 members. Praise God. I hope it continues to shrink. And most of them are related to former pastor Fred Phelps. He died in 2014, and it's impossible to imagine he's in heaven. That church's principal self-professed mission is protesting famous people and promoting hate. For a time, that church averaged protests at 6 different locations each day. The church would spend an annual budget of $250,000 on protesting in all 50 states. It protested funerals of soldiers returning from Afghanistan and Iraq. People would hold up signs reading, "Thank God for dead soldiers." The church has protested funerals of numerous celebrities, from Roger Ebert to Steve Jobs. The church protested funerals of child victims from the Sandy Hook Elementary School shootings. The church actually recorded a song adapted from Michael Jackson's "We Are the World," and that song was entitled "God Hates the World." But in commenting on this church, the secular media has never abbreviated the church's name to Westboro Church, but instead the media has been careful to mention it is Westboro Baptist Church, where the word Baptist is emphasized. And that is so unfortunate, because literally no Baptist denomination and no Baptist association or group has ever accepted the congregants at Westboro Baptist Church. No group has ever accepted them as legitimate Baptists. The Southern Baptist Convention has publicly denounced them and totally repudiated what this church does. That hateful congregation has given all Baptists and Baptist groups a public relations black eye. Question: do we understand now how unchurched, unregenerate, non-Christians could have preconceived misconceptions about Baptists? I've never had an alliance to a particular denominational label, and that includes Baptist. I am a conservative evangelical Christian, and that's what we're all going to be in heaven. We lose our denominational labels, leave them behind. More and more Baptist groups are wise enough to understand that denominationalism can be a serious deterrent to reaching the unchurched and unsaved. The famous preacher Charles Spurgeon was one of the first to understand that. Charles Spurgeon died in 1892 and is still respected across almost all denominational lines. He was the most famous Baptist pastor in the 19th century. And he is the most often published and most often quoted Baptist preacher from all time. It is said that if someone from the States visited England during Spurgeon's time there, once this person returned home, he wouldn't be asked if he had seen the Queen. He would be asked if he had heard Mr. Spurgeon preach. The man was amazing. It's interesting. The name of Spurgeon's famous London megachurch was London Metropolitan Tabernacle. London Metropolitan Tabernacle. But notice the denominational label Baptist was nowhere in the name of that church. Although it is known that Spurgeon was a devout Baptist. Dr. Jerry Falwell was an oftentimes misunderstood Baptist. I had different occasions to meet with him privately. He had the most charismatic personality of any human I've ever seen. Amazing. He founded the largest evangelical university in history, Liberty University. I should add, LU football team beat UTEP and New Mexico State this month. Just thought I'd throw that in. That school he founded, we now know as Liberty University, originated in 1971 as Liberty Baptist College. I should add, I have a friend who was the first graduate from that school that far ago. Then in 1984, Dr. Falwell changed the name to a denominational neutral name to attract potential students from other evangelical non-Baptist congregations. And that's what's happened. LU is now one of this nation's largest universities. And this past spring graduated, get this, graduated more than 30,000 students. Rod and Cindy's son was one of those graduates. Please listen, don't miss this. This church's incorporated and legal name is Mountain View Baptist Church. Our church partners with the Southern Baptist Convention. The Southern Baptist Convention is the largest Protestant evangelical denomination in existence. And in a more regional sense, this church is also a member of 2 state conventions. Texas is unique. Texas, there are 2 state Southern Baptist conventions in Texas. The only other state to have 2 is Virginia. We are members of the oldest convention, founded in 1886, called the Baptist General Convention of Texas, most often abbreviated to Texas Baptist, and we are also a member of the more recent, the Southern Baptist Convention of Texas, founded in 1998. And on an even smaller scale, we are a member of the El Paso Baptist Association. The executive director is Larry Floyd. He has spoken here. He and Lucy visited earlier this month. And I should add, are fans of what's going on. The doctrinal statement we adhere to is the Southern Baptist 2000 Baptist Faith and Message. Understand something. We are not changing our doctrinal statement. We are not changing our denominational partnership. We are not changing our legal incorporated name. This church's legal incorporated name is not changing from Mountain View Baptist Church. Let me repeat that if you happen to zone out for a second. This church's legal incorporated name is not changing from Mountain View Baptist Church. But what I am proposing is that we add another name to our church. We are adding what is most often called a DBA, an acronym. DBA means a doing business as. A DBA is a name that is different from our incorporated name, and this is a common business practice. Example, Kentucky Fried Chicken does business as KFC, in part because the word fried has the negative connotation of cholesterol and fat, and some people are becoming more health conscious. That's part of the reasoning. Federal Express does business as FedEx, and Twitter now does business as X. Marketing is about imaging, and businesses want to present to the public a positive and newer image. Southern Baptists start more churches and start more ethnic churches than any other denomination in existence. And in Nevada, where we moved from, all new Southern Baptist church starts had non-Baptist names. The El Paso Baptist Association does not start a church that has a Baptist name. One of my favorite pastors is Dr. David Jeremiah. He's an excellent teacher. He's authored almost 30 books. I happen, on Sunday mornings, if I'm reviewing my message, because I can multitask, I actually watch or listen to their entire service. An incredible church. In 1981, he succeeded another even more famous author, Dr. Tim LaHaye. Tim LaHaye was co-author of the Left Behind series, but with Jerry Jenkins, but he was also an established author prior to that. But Dr. Hay had been the lead pastor at the Scott Memorial Baptist Church in El Cajon, California. That's in the San Diego area. That church had been an unaffiliated Baptist church, so Dr. Jeremiah brought that congregation into the Southern Baptist Convention. I might add, Craig Laurie's church, Harvest Christian Fellowship, has been a member of the Southern Baptist Convention since 2017. But in 1994, David Jeremiah recognized the importance of minimizing denominational labels in order to attract the unchurched. So he and his congregation adopted the DBA name, Shadow Mountain Community Church. And since that time, the average attendance has increased from 1,200 to more than 10,000 people. Throughout Scripture, God gave additional names to people all the time. God changed Abram's name from Abram to Abraham. Abraham meaning the father of a multitude. And per that name, Abraham became the father or progenitor of the Jewish people. At that same time, God changed Abraham's wife's name from Sarai to Sarah, meaning mother of nations. Abraham's grandson was Jacob. God changed Jacob's name from supplanter or trickster, and he was that. He was deceitful. Changed his name from Jacob to Israel, and Israel meant having power with God. In the New Testament, some people believe that God changed Saul's name to Paul after his conversion, but that isn't true. The name Paul didn't replace the name Saul. Paul is the Greek word for the Jewish word Saul, and because Paul ministered to the Greek-speaking population, it was reasonable for him to take a more familiar form of his own name. There are numerous other biblical characters that experienced a name change, but understand that each time God changed someone's name or gave that person another name, it was to establish a new identity. And that's exactly the reason I am proposing we add a new name so that this church can have a new identity. Using corporate language, a church's identity is called its brand. Its brand. This church once had an excellent brand. Did you know that in the 1970s, this church had a membership of 2,500 people? Did you know that for a time, on an annual basis, this church averaged baptizing more than 105 new converts? Those are impressive numbers. In the 50s, 60s, and into the 70s, this church had an excellent brand that attracted people. But unfortunately, over time, that brand deteriorated. That brand no longer exists. That means this church needs a new brand. A church name isn't what attracts unchurched people to a church. Church people attract unchurched people to church through personal invitation. But a denominational name in some geographical regions, such as ours, can be a huge distraction to unchurched people. Because of this, I'm proposing that we give our church another sense of identification, one that is more neutral instead of denominational, so that we might be more attractive to those who are unchurched and unregenerate. I should add the deacon board to a man The board is in unanimous agreement in doing this. I am proposing that we do all we can to minimize some of the preconceived misconceptions unsaved people have about Baptist congregations. To a sizable percentage of people in El Paso, the name Baptist has a negative connotation. To them, the name Baptist means hellfire and damnation preaching. The name Baptist means always begging for money. And the name Baptist represents a rigid, stiff set of do's and don'ts. That's not me. And that is not who we are. And that is not the image we should want for this church. I cannot count the times someone has said to me, because I pursue people and visit people who visit us, and I've done that for half a century. I can't count the times going into someone's home, someone says, okay, so you're a Baptist church. I understand Baptists are really strict. And I go, well, could be, I guess. So I hear that Baptists can't dance. Is that true? Can Baptists dance? And my response is, can Baptists dance? I guess some can and some can't. It's kind of a coordination thing. That's what I tell them. I anticipated some resistance to this proposal, so let me address 3 objections in closing. 3 objections that some people could have in giving ourselves another name. 1, question, is it ethical to have a name other than our legal name? That is a legitimate question, and we need to address that. Is it ethical for someone to have another name called a nickname or a stage name in addition to the legal name on our birth certificate? I don't think that is unethical, and it's extremely common. Consider some stage names. Frances Ethel Bum was actress Judy Garland. Joan Alexandria Molinsky was comedian Joan Rivers. Morris Joseph Micklewhite is actor Michael Caine, and he's still alive. Patricia May Andrzejewski, I'm sure I messed that up, but that is musician Pat Benatar. Marion Robert Morrison was actor John Wayne, and his nickname was Duke. I should add that Martin Luther King Jr.'s actual birth name was Michael King, after his father. But his father so admired the great Protestant reformer Martin Luther that he changed his own name, and when Michael turned 5, his father changed Michael King to Martin Luther King. Is that unethical? No, it is not. I had a friend from our first church start whose legal name was Lowell. No one called him Lowell. In fact, no one even knew his original name was Lowell. Instead, everyone called him Peter or Pete. And that wasn't even his middle name either. I should add, the biblical Peter also had more than one name. He was also called Simon and Cephas. I don't believe changing a name or adding a number name, in our case, is unethical at all. I believe adding another name as being, as Jesus said we should be, wise as serpents and harmless as doves. That's Matthew 10, verse 16. All I am proposing is that we reposition ourselves to better relate to the unsaved and unchurched around us, which is a thoroughly biblical practice. Remember the acronym I mentioned not so far long ago? Knowns, capital N, capital O, capital N, capital E, capital S, knowns. Knowns represent the religiously unaffiliated. In 2007, knowns, adult knowns, made up 16% of the population of this nation. Now, in 2025, knowns make up almost 30% of the population. We need to be reaching knowns, the religious unaffiliated. 1 Corinthians 9, and guys, I won't do this for a minute or two. It's considered a classic biblical text in what is called contextualization. To contextualize means to put something into a larger context so that we can see its true and intended meaning. As an example, an algebra problem might seem impractical and unnecessary until that problem is contextualized. And in that case, contextualization would mean to use that mathematical problem in a real life situation or context, and then it becomes more understandable. Personally, I hated algebra no matter what context it was in. In evangelism, to contextualize the gospel means to customize the gospel package and presentation to the wider sociological context to help the target audience better understand and accept the gospel message. One fantastic example of contextualization was the 19th century Hudson Taylor. Hudson Taylor founded China Inland Mission. He was a British missionary that over time learned to be extremely sensitive to the Chinese people, and he ultimately adopted their culture, their customs, and practices. His first visits to China were unsuccessful, in part because he didn't understand contextualization. He brought the medical supplies the people desperately needed and wanted, but the Chinese were still hesitant to accept him. Hudson wasn't accepted in part because he wore the same large, dark coat that was so common in cold, damp, fog-filled London at that time. But the Chinese didn't understand that custom and so referred to him as the Black Devil. That's not a good thing. So Hudson decided to dress in traditional Chinese clothes and then shave his forehead and weave his hair into the Chinese queue or pigtail. In a practical sense, Hudson Taylor essentially became Chinese in order to reach the Chinese. And he succeeded. He ultimately brought 800 missionaries to China. He ultimately evangelized thousands and thousands of Chinese, and he established hundreds of churches and schools. That happened because he didn't attempt to Europeanize the Chinese. Instead, he intended to make Christians out of them. And that's what Paul encouraged us to do in this passage we're about to read. I believe Paul had in mind a reference from the Old Testament. Proverbs 11, verse 30, the second half reads, "He who wins souls is wise." I'm curious, is the opposite also true? He who doesn't win souls is foolish? Something to think about. Paul was a soul winner. And I don't mention this often in public or private, but I am a soul winner. And I have the receipts to prove that. Paul is commenting on soul winning in these verses. Notice verse 19 from 1 Corinthians 9. "For though I am free from all men, I have made myself a servant to all." Why? "That I might win the more." Verse 20, "And to the Jews I became as a Jew." Why? "That I might win Jews." To those who are under the law, as under the law. Why? "That I might win those who are under the law." Verse 21, "To those who are without law, as without law, not being without law toward God, but under law toward Christ." Why? "That I might win those who are without law." Verse 22, "To the weak I became as weak." Why? "That I might win the weak." "I have become all things to all people." Why? "That I might by all means save some." Verse 23, "Now I do this I do for the gospel's sake, that I may be a partaker of it with you." Paul did more than attempt to understand his target audience. Paul acted on that understanding. 5 times in this passage, he said he became like someone else in order to better relate to that someone so he could then have a chance to reach that someone for the gospel. The gospel of Jesus Christ is cross-cultural, and it should be packaged and presented so that each culture can understand it and accept it. There are two extremes, I should add, two extremes we need to be careful of in contextualizing the gospel. One extreme is to not contextualize it at all. And second is to go to hyper-contextualization, an extreme form of contextualization. Some churches refuse to adapt and relate to the secular culture. I've attended and or preached at dozens of churches. And in some of them, I have experienced a serious time warp. The first Sunday I preached here, I met with the search team after. I didn't even know I was going to be at that. And Pat Clemens was chairperson of the search team. She did a phenomenal job. But I was sitting there with members of the committee and Pat asked me, because I had just preached my first sermon here, and asked me about my first impressions of the church. I was hesitant to answer that question because I didn't want to sound unkind or hypercritical. I wasn't wanting to blame the congregation. The congregation was just doing what previous pastoral administrations had instructed them to do. But she said to be truthful, so I said the one thing that stood out to me most was how dated this church was. I said the service reminded us of doing church in the 1950s and 60s. We left that morning in a quasi state of shock. Rod and Cindy were there. Were not in shock? Yes. Our grandson was here. He'd helped us move. And when we were driving up to church, he said, "Papa, that looks like Alcatraz." He lives in Northern California. Well, it kind of looks better now, doesn't it? Much better. But then some churches, well, it's like this. This church was dated because times had changed and there had been no contextualization to relate to those changing times. But then some churches take contextualization to mean a hypersensitivity to the culture. The services seem more secular than Christian, to the point after I left one of those more extreme seeker-driven congregations, a pastor friend who attended with me said, "Did we actually go to church?" And I responded, "I'm not sure." So in contextualizing, we need to be careful to avoid extremes. Second question, is giving ourselves another name in some sense a form of compromise? Is giving ourselves another name, a DBA, is that in some sense a form of compromise? Now this is one objection I don't understand at all, because there is no biblical text, no verse that would require us to name a church Baptist. Throughout the entire New Testament, there is literally no mention of an ancient congregation being named Baptist. Understand, the denominational label Baptist does not have a biblical origin. None. So this is not a biblical issue. In preparing this, I suspected that after this presentation, someone would object to this change and decide to attend church somewhere else. And that's someone's prerogative to do. And I respect that, if that is what you feel you should do. But understand, there is literally no biblical justification for doing that. Sila Vista Church is the largest Baptist church in El Paso. Rod, would you raise your hands, guys? Rod and Cindy, just raise your hands. Most of us know them. I've known Rod since he was probably 16, and because I knew his father quite well. His father was a pastor. And Rod was a pastor at Sila Vista, and for a time, I believe 8 years, he was lead pastor there until he turned that role over to the gentleman who's there now. Both he and Cindy were on staff there for the better part of 3 decades. I know Rod for, I don't even know how many times each December put on this massive, spectacular Christmas pageant, and thousands of people would attend, and some of you have even seen it, but that was all Rod's genius and doing. I am still shocked knowing how God has used Rod and Cindy before at Sila Vista. I'm shocked that they would really consider becoming a part of us and helping us do this. I'm honored, but I'm still shocked. Like, us, who are we, you know? But Rod shared with our deacons. I had him come in and speak to the deacons about this matter. He said the original name of that church was Sila Vista Park Baptist Church. That's 5 words. That's excessive. Terrible name. Earlier on, though, after he arrived in El Paso and joined the staff, the church agreed to change their name. So Sila Vista Park Baptist Church became Sila Vista Church. And the church, as a result of that name change, exploded from less than 200 in attendance to at one point reaching 3,000. Understand something. A congregation isn't considered a Baptist congregation because the sign out front reads Baptist. No, a Baptist congregation is considered an authentic Baptist congregation contingent on what that congregation teaches and practices. There are thousands of churches that do not have the name Baptist and do not have a formal connection to a Baptist denomination or association. But those churches are still Baptistic in doctrine and practice, and that's what matters, not the name. Our doctrine is not going to change. Our teaching is not going to change. And if you cannot trust me in that, then respectfully, you should find a pastor you can trust. Number 3, question. There are people who have visited us because we were advertised as a Baptist church. So aren't we going to miss some people of a Baptist persuasion if we posture ourselves without a Baptist label? The answer is yes. We might miss some relocating Baptists. But remember that our target audience isn't Southern Baptists from Georgia, Oklahoma, and Alabama. No. Now, the McConnells are from Oklahoma. Praise God for that. But doesn't mean we'll turn people away that relocate. No, but our target audience are the irreligious, are the agnostics, atheists, skeptics, liberal progressives, humanists, socialists, and communists, the unchurched, people in the cults, bar hoppers, hell raisers, the religious self-righteous, and all other sinners and people far from God. That's our target audience. Our mission is the Great Commission. Our mission is not to attract other Baptists. The reason we are here is to attract the unsaved so we can then bring them to Jesus. And as I said from personal experience and from other sources, the name Baptist has become a societal detriment to doing that. The issue is that removing man-made barriers through using a more non-denominational name gives us more evangelistic potential. I'm going to quote John Jessel. I told him, I got permission. I told him I was going to do this. John and Dal and I were sitting in the office and discussing this proposed name change or additional name. And John made the statement, we don't want to bring baggage to the new location. I couldn't agree more. We don't want to bring baggage to the new location. The primary reason we're adding another name is to rid ourselves of denominational baggage that unchurched people sometimes use as an excuse not to visit us. Do you believe that once we're in heaven, Jesus is going to ask us if we were a Baptist? I promise you that conversation won't happen. It won't, because God doesn't care that much about denominational affiliations, but God does care about who we bring to heaven with us. Amen. It is said Charlie Kirk had a mantra that he repeated often, and that mantra was, make heaven crowded. And that is what I have tried to do for the better part of 5.5 decades. This church exists to make heaven crowded. The remaining question is, I know, relate. I don't care. And that's significant because Chiefs are playing right now against the Raiders, and I'm not anxious to get out of here. You notice that? So anyway, that's a personal sacrifice I'm making. Anyway, the remaining question is, how do we determine another name? One thing we will not do is to have a congregational vote on another name. To open up the selection of another name to the entire congregation to discuss and debate and then vote on, that could be total disaster. Almost ecclesiastical suicide. So we're going to put together a smaller name nominating committee. And we're going to give the congregation sufficient time to submit name suggestions. We will receive suggested names through November 30th. We will not consider names submitted after that date. But that's a reasonable period of time. I promise that each name that is suggested will receive careful and thoughtful consideration. Then the name nominating committee will work through all the submitted names and ultimately decide on the one name that we will use to establish a new identity and brand for our church. The deacons want to be a part of that committee, but I need to add another 7 to 10 people to complete the committee. I want to add women. I want to add younger people. I want to add both members and non-members. I want the committee to represent a cross-section of this congregation. We're going to just select random people to be a part of that committee. And if you're not invited, don't freak out. Don't get upset. There are three criteria, guys, you can throw this up, to consider in selecting a name. One, it cannot have a denominational name. And that should be clear after all this. 2, it needs to be no more than 3 words. No more than 3 words. Even those 3 words will in time be abbreviated to probably 2 words in normal conversation. Bill Hybels founded Willow Creek Community Church in South Barrington, Illinois in the 80s. He did not finish strong, but that church was a massive church. Over 30,000 people would attend each weekend. Willow Creek Community Church. I heard him in person. He just calls it Willow. Not even Willow Creek. So no more than 3 words. And number 3, it needs to be an uncommon name. We don't want to use a name that other churches are using in our region. It needs to be an uncommon name. Now, if you submit a name, please include your own name, because we might have questions about that name. So include your own name and be prepared to explain why you selected that particular name. Now, I want my contact information up there, guys. Thank you. This is my contact information. Phone, area code 925, that's Northern California, 305-7929. My email is pastorlarrywebb@gmail.com. So text me or call me or email me or tell me after service and submit a name. We want to accumulate. Someone said the way to get one fantastic idea is to get a bunch of ideas. And that's true. And that's exactly what we'll be doing.